A few weeks ago, I was working the night shift at my restaurant job. I was handling a relatively large table of 8 people. Throughout the night, the table was telling me how good of customer service I was providing, and at the end of the night, they left me a tip of 20%. Meanwhile, the table next to mine, my coworker was tending to. He was not providing good customer service as I could see, and the customer didn't really look like they were having a good experience. Even with this happening, he still received a tip of 20%. This brought up the question in my mind of, if I'm working this much harder, what is the point of working harder as we are receiving the same tip? Every one of you has most likely left a tip before, and most of the time you do this without really thinking about it. Even if you don't work in the food industry, tipping can leave a large impact on you. If you feel obligated to give an extra 20% at the end of the night when the service isn't very good, it hinders your experience greatly. I've worked in the food industry for over a year, and I have seen just how tipping doesn't reflect the quality of service that is often given. Sometimes people on different levels of customer service, such as someone who's very good and someone who's very bad at customer service, they can receive totally different tips. And this is with the person who has bad service receiving more in tips than the person with good service. Tipping in restaurants should not be mandatory, and the current system is flawed as it fails to reward employees properly and fairly. First off, today I will talk about how tipping negatively impacts the food service workers. Then I will talk about how it damages the customer experience, and lastly I will discuss how tips create an unfair and unpredictable system. Tipping negatively impacts the service worker. It creates a dependency on the customer rather than the employer. A lot of workers rely on tips to make a living, and according to the Economic Policy Institute, the federal minimum wage for someone who receives tips is $2.13. If this isn't met, employers need to make up the difference and get it to where someone has met the federal minimum wage that is without tips. And this dependency on tips makes servers and workers in general have to tolerate rude behavior sometimes just in order to try and get the tips. And this is something that I have experienced firsthand. It also leads to inconsistent income, and it increases financial stress. Workers can have good service and not receive a tip, or bad service and receive a tip. According to Lynn and Withiam, tips often reflect the customer mood or biases rather than the actual service that is provided. This kind of unpredictability and having to rely so heavily on the customer makes it hard for food service workers to establish a stable income, as it always is just an outside variable which they cannot control. Tipping also creates individualism in restaurants. Tips are based on individual performance, and this can create competition between staff rather than collaboration and all of them working on the same thing in order to try and help the restaurant become better. A study from Cornell Hospitality Quarterly found that tipping often reduces overall morale by incentivizing self-interest over group success. Tipping creates an unfair experience for the customer. It makes the customer have to determine what fair pay is for their server. Customers feel obligated to give a fair tip without knowing how it will affect the worker's pay. They have to make ethical decisions and decisions about money after they have already paid for the meal, when they should just be enjoying the experience that they just had and that they just paid for. A journal of customer research found that this pressure lowers customer satisfaction and creates anxiety within them. Tipping can also create an awkward and uncomfortable situation for the customer. A lot of customers will feel judged if they don't provide a tip that is enough in the eyes of both their server and the people that are around them, because a lot of times you're not alone in a restaurant. This forces someone to tip a certain amount even when the service wasn't that good, and especially if they're dining with their friends or just a group of other people, this will definitely happen, as they won't want to seem like they are cheap in a way and won't really want that to impact how people look at them. Tipping also lacks transparency. Customers don't know where their tip is going. It could be going to the manager, the cooks in the back. It could be split up between everyone that's on the payroll, or it could go directly to their server. Different restaurants have different rules for tip distribution. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, employers are legally allowed to pool their tips, and so the customer who thinks they might be rewarding the person in front of them could be rewarding the entire staff. Tipping creates a system that is unfair and unpredictable. Two servers with completely different levels of service can receive the same amount of tips, like I had previously said. But receiving a tip should be rewarded based on the quality that is provided, but that's not the case in our current system. Tipping requirements are not the same at every place as well. Certain restaurants force you to have a 20% gratuity tip, as they call it, if a table goes over a certain amount of people. This is built in the bill, and it makes the experience unfair, and it makes it kind of an awkward situation for both the customer and worker, especially if the experience wasn't that good. The tipping system results in income being reliable as well for the workers. If it's slow in a restaurant, and this could be because of outside factors, it hinders the income of a person who relies on tips. A Harvard Business Review article noted that tipping systems contribute to high turnover rates due to instability. On the contrary, some people might argue that tipping allows workers to be directly rewarded through good service, and it gives them the opportunity to earn more money. This might sound like reality, but tipping often doesn't reflect service quality. Like I had previously stated, people decide on giving tips based on their mood, biases, or social pressures, and outside views not pertaining to the person that's giving them their food. There's no guarantee that a fair tip will be rewarded, even if exceptional service is provided. To wrap things up, tipping may seem like a small part of the restaurant experience, but in reality, it majorly shapes the restaurant industry. Starting off today, we talked about how tipping negatively impacts workers because of their dependency on the customers. Then we talked about the customers and how it can create awkwardness and put them in a bad spot at the end of their meal. The last thing we talked about was how the system in general is unfair and how it is unpredictable. Whether you've worked in the food industry or just eaten at a restaurant, tipping has impacted you. By being more mindful about the system, you can make smarter and you can make decisions that are not as forced in your next dining experience. Great service deserves recognition, but not because of pressure, guilt, or social pressures. A tip should be a thank you for a good service that is provided and a good experience that is had. Thank you.